to the advent of Power Pro Wrestling.
Dave Brown with Corey Macklin. We are live in the studios of WMC TV5 with Power Pro Wrestling.
It all happened in one place. Memphis, Tennessee.
You want to wrestle me Memphis style? You're from Memphis, Tennessee. Is that how you talk from Memphis, Tennessee?
And now it's time for you to relive all the biggest moments from wrestling's greatest city with one of the men who helped make so much of that magic happen. This is Memphis Memories. Memphis Memories. And the owner, the founder, and the president of Power Pro Wrestling, Randy Hales.
Hello, I'm Randy Hales, and welcome to Memphis Memories Podcast right here. This is the YouTube Extra, and we have a special show as we're going back in the archives, picking up some great interviews, reliving great moments with some of the legends of Memphis wrestling. This one, very first podcast that my mentor, my father figure, the great late Eddie Marlin, first podcast he ever did, and let's take a listen to that podcast right now, that interview with Eddie Marlin.
And I don't know what I'll say after that build-up you did, Randy, but part of it is certainly true. Loved my wife for 65 years. We married when we was in high school, went back to school after we was married, had 2 daughters, and been living right here in this house for 58 years.
And now you have a roommate.
Now I have a roommate that I've been knowing almost 50 years.
So that's pretty cool. But I guess we're going to go way back to start, and I think it'd be interesting. And Jim Cornette on his podcast, Cornette came to the house a few weeks ago, and he was interviewing you for his commentary about the NWA 70th show. But I guess we'll go back from the start, and I think the start is you as a wrestling fan. So early memories, Eddie, of you attending the Nashville matches, and I believe it was at the Hippodrome.
The old Hippodrome out on West End Avenue was my first, you might say, professional wrestling. I wrestled at a place on Fifth Avenue that was run by this local guy, and a wrestler by the name of Dick Dumbrumrin, who later wrestled as the name of Dick Dunn. He called me, and I went down, worked out with him, and go down and wrestle. We'd watch the matches on Tuesday night, and then we'd try to duplicate them on Wednesday night. You didn't get paid, but you went down and had a lot of fun. And it just grew from there. I got a call from Nick Goulas. They had a wrestling match in Fort McClellan, Alabama, at the Army base, and someone got hurt that was on the card, and they needed somebody. So I went down, and that was my first experience with really professional wrestling where I got paid.
And for Nick Goulas wasn't exactly known as a great payoff guy, was he?
No, but whatever I got then seemed great to me.
You know, same thing. I went probably 10 years announcing without getting a dime, then started writing in the program, would get money, $5 a story, and then it ended up, you have to pay your dues in the wrestling business. I want to back up, Eddie, from the days with Dick Dunn and the days with Nick Goulas, because we talked about this before, and it's a funny story. You, as I said earlier, a man of character, and you have never gotten in trouble in your life. And never. And except one time you came close, and it was due to a little incident at the wrestling matches. And later on you became, and Jerry Jarrett and I've talked about it, and Jim Cornette said it, you were almost the sheriff of the Memphis territory. If there was problems, you would take care of it. But there was a situation just one time in your life and was not charged for anything. Tell the story how you found yourself at the Hippodrome in the back seat of a police car.
Well, back in those days, wide suspenders was in the thing. So I had them on and was sitting up in the bleachers, me and my wife, and this big old guy sitting behind me kept flipping my suspenders, flipping them. And I got up and turned around and told him, now you had your fun, don't flip him no more. So he flipped him in the front. So I hit him and he went down and I jumped on top of him and I thought, if he ever gets up, he'll kill me. So the policeman pulled me up off of it. They put us in the patrol car. I was up front and he and the other policeman was in the back. And that policeman said, I didn't know a bear wrestled out here tonight. I said he didn't. He said, it looked like a bear got a hold of this guy. So carried us on down to the booking station. And when we went in down there right after we got there, my father came in and he told the booking sergeant that I'll pay both of them fine if you'll just let them go back in the alley here and finish that fight. And he told my father, said, we can't do that. We got to carry this guy to the hospital.
So that was the end of that, and neither one of you went to jail, right?
Well, I don't think, I know I didn't. I don't know about him.
That's funny. Then let's move forward a few years because you started wrestling. Your daughter, Deborah, and you were already at that point working for Nick Gulas, and not only wrestler, you check up towns and all that sort of thing. Deborah, your daughter, met Jerry Jarrett, and they became engaged, and they ended up getting married, and they've been married for over 50 years as a matter of fact, and we just saw them here last night. But throughout the time, you'd have one job, two jobs, three jobs. You worked at Gates Rubber Company, but finally tell about the time where Jerry Jarrett came to you with the opportunity for you to run Jonesboro and Tupelo and get into the promoting, quit your job, and talk about, I'm sure that had benefits and maybe still have benefits from Gates because you worked there a long time. But the big decision of quitting Gates, becoming a promoter, and taking over Jonesboro and Tupelo, and then becoming a big part of the future of Memphis wrestling.
I worked for Gates Rubber Company for 13 years, and it was I was in supervision, but it was a hot place, hard work for all the guys. And Jerry wanted me to quit. And I said, I can't do that. And he said, okay, I'll sell you the promotion rights to Jonesboro, Arkansas. And said, I'll guarantee you $400 a week, which at that time was pretty doggone good guarantee. So I did. And shortly after that, the promotion rights to Tupelo, Mississippi come available. And George Gulas and I bought that. Figured George, being in partners, would give me a little uphand on getting some good wrestlers on my card. And we ran that for years and years and years. And finally I sold Tupelo and kept on running Jonesboro, Arkansas. We had the old American Legion region. Charlie Wade took care of the ticket sales and the figuring up, the report and all, and just had a good experience. And it turned out to be to my benefit.
And we got to know each other through Jonesboro, Arkansas, and wouldn't life for both of us be, especially today, change if that never would have happened?
That's right. This little old boy come knocking on the door of the dressing room, named Randy Hales, and he's about 10 years old, and he wanted to sell my pictures. So back then, the black and white, you sold them for 50 cents, and whoever sold them got a nickel a piece. So Randy would sell about 10 a week, get his 50 cents. And then, for some reason or other, I can't remember, the announcer had to quit.
He stole money. He was a member of the American Legion, and he stole some money off of a fundraising drive, and he disappeared in the middle of the night.
Yes, so. But Randy, he became the ring announcer in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And he did that quite a while. And one evening, I got to Jonesboro early, and Randy said, Eddie, I need to talk to you. And I said, all right, what do you need to say? And at this time, the wrestling bug had bit him. He said, I'm going to quit college and just start announcing. And I said, well, that's good, Randy. Go ahead and quit college and get you a job on a garbage truck or something, and I won't be using you no more. And Randy didn't like that idea, so he went ahead and graduated from college, and I'm really proud of him for that. And Randy has been in my life for, like you say, almost 50 years. I didn't have a son. I had 2 daughters. So I guess you might say Randy was my adopted son, and he still is today. Over the 50 years, I don't know of a cross word that we ever had.
And if there was one, it was something I did stupid. You know how it is, Sean. You're young and dumb and do silly stuff. And I did in the past. Eddie was being nice there. One thing, Eddie, that I think we need to cover, because I think it's a cool story, and I think people don't relate to this, and we glossed over it. The era before you quit Gates, you, at that point, Jerry Jarrett started booking. He had opened up in around 1970, Louisville. And so you were working a full-time job at Gates Rubber Company, and then Tojo would pick you up when you left work. And just tell that story of holding 2 jobs and being one of the featured matches in the Tennessee territory.
Yeah, I'd get off work at Gates at 3 o'clock, and the 2 Mile Parkway is a service station there at the interstate, and Tojo would meet me there, and he had a pillow and a blanket he kept in his back seat. He said, you get in the back seat, you sleep, I'll drive. And we did that a lot of time. Monday on from Memphis, Tuesday Louisville, Wednesday Evansville. And one day I told Tojo, said, I'm going to pay for this gas. And he said, you pay for gas? You don't ride with me no more. Tojo liked you. He'd do anything in the world for you. But if he didn't like you, he just didn't want you talking to him. And you better not, because he would let you know why he didn't want you to talk to him.
The next point on the thing I thought would be interesting is the territory was different then, because in around the 72 and all that point of time, Jerry Jarrett was a booker, and he hadn't split from Nick Goulas, but you were all over the place. You might do TV in Memphis or in Jackson or in Louisville or Birmingham, Chattanooga, all over. Well, you wrestled underneath, and you refereed, and you did all kinds of things, helping out the promotion. Then I want you to talk about the story we've talked about several times lately, when you went down on TV, and this was in today's world, and the wrestling is changed these days, and people know some of our lingo and that sort of thing. But you got your first push and did your first angle, and it happened on Chattanooga TV that then followed by the Chattanooga house show, where you ended up selling tickets. But the first major deal you were ever involved in, do you remember that story?
Yeah, I sure do. I was booked in Chattanooga, just on TV, just on the fall guy, just under this guy, against Saul Weingroff and the Germans. And I forgot who my partner was. But anyhow, we was getting beat up pretty bad. And I don't know, I just sort of went wild. Started throwing fists, drop kicking. And next thing you know, they disqualified me. And Saul and the Germans, they took a powder. Well, on the house show that night, it was booked Lynn Rossi and Bearcat Brown against Saul and the Germans. So Lynn Rossi went out and told the promoter, that Harry Thornton, said, we'd like to make one change in tonight's matches. Said, we'd like you to put Saul Weingroff in the ring and give us that young guy, Eddie Marlin. They always thought I was young, and I was as old as he was. And so they did that, and we had a packed house that night, and that was really the breaking point in my career.
And that's something we talk a lot about, Sean's going back to the O days. And I told you earlier, because most of the video, of course, there wasn't videos in the 60s and the 70s, but a lot of my fondest moments from the 70s. So we're going to talk about that, the early part of the career before, and we may not even get into the promotional part today. We may a little bit about, I don't want to hold Eddie too long, but I wanted to talk about that, early part of your career. And one of the things I remember about your career was your tag team with Tommy Gilbert. And Tommy was a great wrestler. And I thought Eddie, at that point, Tommy was younger in the business than Eddie. I think Eddie especially carried the load as far as the talking and the money part of the team, but they were a great team. So I want you to talk about your team with Tommy Gilbert, then later on your successful money drawing team with Tojo Yamamoto. Want to know, and so that's a little bit about tag teams. I want to know who the person was that you made the most money with as a opponent. Just basic deals, and maybe even throw in. Tell me who the toughest son of a gun that you ever was in the ring with. So that's quite a lot of subject, but we'll start by talking about Tommy Gilbert, then Tojo, and the person you made the most money with.
Okay, Tommy Gilbert. We wrestled together about 6 or 7 years. And I had one brother, Thomas Marlin, and Tommy Gilbert was, to me, like my second brother. We would travel for years together. We never had any crosswords. And Tommy was sort of moody. We'd meet, and he'd get in the car, and how you doing, Tommy? All right. That's all he'd say. The next time he'd get in the car, how you doing, Tommy? Fine, how you doing, Eddie? And then we'd laugh and talk on the whole trip and have a good trip. And like I say, he was like my second brother, and I think he was a great wrestler, great performer, and a great person.
And you guys got over, and that was an era where Jerry Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto, I think would have to say, was the top tag team in the territory. However, they would get needed to be rested at times. Sometimes they were both involved in single programs and feuds. But for a period of that 6 years, you and Tommy were established week after week after week after the main week after week as the main tag team. So who were the opponents? And I know Lawler and White were one of the interns, and you can remember that better than me. Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin. Who did you wrestle?
Well, we wrestled the interns with Ramey, Saul and the Germans, and Lawler and White. And later on in life, the Aussies come over, and we wrestled against Bill Dundee and George Barnes, and just some mass guys, Phil Hickerson, and the Shadow, Big Tank Patterson. There's just numbers of them, but there's so many I really can't remember.
And how about, I'll tell this story because it was unusual to have tag team title changes in Jonesboro, weekly matches in Jonesboro. So the match was scheduled Tojo Yamamoto and Eddie Marlin for the Southern Tag Team titles against Al Green and Phil Hickerson in Jonesboro for the Tag Team Championship. And I've never told the second part of this story to you before, just remember it right now. But anyway, for some reason, Al Green either got hurt, he quit, I don't remember the details, but Al was not able to be there, and the plan was for a Tojo and Eddie tag team. So anyway, my old friend Randy Wade's dad, Charlie, that Eddie mentioned earlier, was, in the people's eyes, the local promoter because they couldn't know Eddie Marlin was a promoter. But anyway, so Charlie went in the ring, and then Eddie or Jerry, somebody had told him what to say, said, hey, the guy didn't show up, said we're going to have a single match between Phil Hickerson and Eddie Marlin, and the winners will be the Southern Tag Team champions. And so in a single match, I saw my first live title change as Eddie Marlin beat Phil Hickerson for the Southern Tag Team Championship. And then the next week, and I had this recorded, the next TV on Channel 13 the following Saturday, I would record the audio every week before video players, Sean. Back in the day, if you can comprehend that, you had your tape recorder. And so you hear my buddy Randy and me, because Eddie Marlin went out and explained what happened in Jonesboro, because they didn't have videotape of the match, but he explained it, and he started talking about Jonesboro, and he said, yeah, promoter Charlie Wade got in the ring, got on the microphone, and he decided, and you hear Randy and I in the background. I'd give anything if I still had that recording, but Randy and I are also happy because Jonesboro got mentioned and Charlie got mentioned and Eddie was champion. Do you remember that particular circumstance with that title change?
Randy, I'm 88 years old, and a lot of them things have slipped my mind. I don't remember that, but if I beat Phil Hickson, I beat a tough guy.
He's a tough son of a gun.
Yes, he was. And old Phil, I seen him at Tommy Gilbert's funeral, and he still looks like $1 million.
He had a great career in radio as well, country music disc jockey, and he's retired from that. So your partnership with Tojo, you won those titles at the end of December '74, and then probably in about February of 75, and you mentioned them earlier, but George Barnes and Bill Dundee came in the territory, and it was a time period where Lawler kind of got crosshairs with Jerry Jarrett and was refusing to go to the towns on the eastern Tennessee end, and Knoxville and Bristol and that sort of thing, and he said, I'm the champion. Said, I don't need to go to the sound. So Jerry quit booking him, and Lawler was drawing a lot of money. But Jerry, what's right's what's right. And he sent him away, and he brought in George and Bill Dundee in start of 75. So what your thoughts of them, who you thought the money was, type of thing, and we'll morph into Bill, because y'all were the first opponents. Y'all ended up selling out with them several weeks in a row, drew a lot of money, and then later on we'll get to the fact that when Bill switched over, but the initial coming in, knowing Lawler was a big part of the reason you guys are drawing, he goes away, and thank goodness along comes Barnes and Dundee. Were you a little nervous about your top draw leaving, and how quick did you know that you wasn't going to lose a beat?
Well, anytime you lose a wrestler like Lawler, it gives you some concern. But like you said, when Barnes and Dundee come in, right away you could tell they were going to draw money. Because not only was they the toughest team around, they were so different, Dundee, Tojo said he was too pretty to be a bad guy, and Barnes just old roughneck looking boy, but they were a tough team, and they proved to be able to draw money.
And y'all had some great matches with Tojo, and you all over the territory, and the territory did not miss a beat.
No, fortunately it kept going, and people, they out of sight, out of mind, I guess you might say. They, instead of being hollering Jerry Lawler, they was hollering for Tojo and Eddie. Beat the Barnes and Dundee.
Then after a few months, George got homesick, and George was just different than Bill, and didn't. Bill was talking about the other day when he came and visit. He just didn't like Americans, and Bill said that last week, and Bill did. Bill loved it here. So George went away. And then for a few months, I think Bill teamed with that crazy Chris Coate. Do you remember him? And they were tag team champions. And then one particular incident on television, the interns were beating the heck out of you and Ken Ramey 2-on-1. And then finally, in a shock, because everybody else had left TV, said Bill Dundee came out and made the save, helped you. They got him down, and then you got up and you helped him. And you and Bill against the interns drew money, a lot of money. And then later on, I mean, what can you say when you talk about Memphis wrestling? Dundee, Fargo, Lawler, there's not many that we can say drew more money than Bill Dundee, but that initial thing of him becoming a fan favorite by helping you. Did you agree with Tojo? Did you think that Dundee needed to be a good guy and was too pretty to be a bad guy?
Yeah, his looks proved that, but his action said he ought to be a bad guy. But his looks, and he was a good guy. And when he come to save me, that was sort of a shock, but it worked out to be a great deal because Dundee and I were partners for several weeks, and we fought the interns and Ken Ramey, and it drew some money. So Dundee coming to my rescue was another good thing in my life.
Well, who would you say you drew the most money with as in a single program? And also, second question is, who is the toughest son of a gun you've ever been in the ring with, or even met in the wrestling business? So those two questions: who did you draw the most money with, and who's the toughest son of a gun ever?
Well, without a doubt, it was Big Al Green. We drew the most money with him. We was on some sellout cards for several weeks, and without a doubt, it's two of them. That Al Green was a big, tough son of a gun, and for pound, Bill Superstar Dundee was as tough as a pine knot, and I don't think anybody, pound for pound, is any tougher than Bill Dundee.
And he'll fight you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and he'll win, too.
Okay, there's so much subjects, and I think we've talked for a while, and we live together, and we're here every day, so I think I'm just going to close with a couple of questions, and so I think I can bother you with to do this in a few weeks and just pick a subject and go at it again, don't you?
Yes, sir.
But I guess I'll close by asking this. I ask you who do you do the most money with, and that sort of thing. I will ask you the time period, whether it's a promoter, a wrestler, or whatever, doesn't matter. The time period that this territory was the hottest, the absolutely hottest, and you made the most money. If you can. I know you're not real good on dates, but you might can remember the programs or whatever. When did you make the most money?
I think it was in the early 80s. We would drive, Jerry and I would ride down to Memphis, and when the buds come out on the trees, started turning springtime, that's when the business really started to pop. And of course, Jerry and Tojo and Fargo was against Lawler and White on top. Tommy Gibbert and I was underneath. And they had several sellouts at the Mid-South Coliseum with them being on top and me and Tommy. And Jared say that it's getting burnt out in the main event. So they'd drop down in different matches, and Tommy and I would go on top. Both of us would be a nervous wreck because been having good houses. Now we're the main event. We got to do something. But it seemed that they would hold up fairly well. It wouldn't top their numbers, but it was decent, So that's the time in the early 80s.
One thing I like to say is that, as you know, I did 3 years at King Jerry Lawler's Hall of Fame Bar and Grill, and wrestling fans would come down, and you were never there, Eddie, but there was a VIP room. If I could really tell the wrestling fans and wanted see stuff, even if they weren't from Memphis. They could be from Australia. Oh, but I'd take them down and give them a tour. And one of the things that I like to tell them is to brag on Memphis wrestling is I use the year 1974. And I'll ask you the question. In 1974, the biggest wrestling arena was in the biggest city, New York City. And in July of 1974, do you know any guesses on how many people they drew to wrestling in New York City the month of July 1974? You want to guess?
I just don't have no idea.
16,000 people. 16,000 people. But, and this is what I tell the people to make them see the importance of Memphis wrestling. July 1974. Do you know how many people attended the matches at the Mid-South Coliseum on a Monday night in Memphis?
I'd say 11,000.
But there was 5 Mondays in the month of July. New York ran one time at Madison Square Garden, so they did 16,000 people for the month of July. Memphis did almost close to like 57,000 people, sold out every Monday night, and there was 5 Mondays in the month of July. So no other wrestling territory in the country in history can match that. And I think that's the legacy that we all were a part of and we all lived and to be proud of. That was way back in November of 2018. That was podcast number 1. Had a little technical problems right then, and for some reason in the editing, they cut off the end of that interview. The very next week on podcast number 2, we finished up that interview, and let's listen to that right now. Asking me the question, Eddie, you hadn't been on TV in public for a long, long time. What would you like to say to the wrestling fans? And here is his response, and we'll be back with the subject of the day.
When my wife died, I was living here by myself in this house. Of course, I'd have visitors, my daughters and their husband, and seemed like bad things bring around good things.
Well, let's go ahead and tell them. Less than a year after Normal died, you came up. You were diagnosed with advanced case of COPD, and to be honest, that you have to be on oxygen 24/7. And the daughters and the son-in-laws are all great, but most of the time, you were here by yourself. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was here by myself awful lot, even though, like I say, they came and visit. And, you know, you just sit here 24/7 by yourself. You know, it gets a little tough. And like I say, bad things turn into good things. Randy got upset with the situation in Memphis, and he moved in with me. And
by the way, we talked about Jerry Jarrett earlier, that he's not just a brilliant wrestling person. He's a brilliant person and a nice person, because it was his idea for me. He called me and said, "Something wrong, kid?" And then he said, "Get your butt to Eddie's right now."
That's a good thing, too. It's helped me. Ain't no way to say how much that it's helped me, and I enjoy it. And like I say, we've never had a crossword and don't expect to. Randy looks at me like an old mother hen.
Sometimes you don't like how I cook biscuits, though.
Yeah, but you do it.
I'm getting better at it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being a guest on the podcast, and I guarantee you there'll be 1,000 of Memphis wrestling fans, thousands and thousands of people, since everybody asks about you all the time. So we'll close this portion of the interview because they hadn't heard from Eddie Marlin in years and years and years. So just close out with a couple of words, a few words, whatever you think, to the fans of Memphis wrestling.
All the fans of Memphis wrestling, you're my second family. My first family, of course, is my real family and Randy Hales, and you, Memphis fans, are my second family. I love all of you. You've been so, so, so good to me. I just wished I could, wished I could repay you, but just saying thank you.
Eddie Marlin passed away on August the 15th, 2019. A few days after that, working on doing my podcast, we were able to talk to superstar Bill Dundee about memories he had with Eddie Marlin. Let's listen to that right now. If Eddie Marlin was looking down on me, knowing what I was doing on this tribute podcast, Memphis Memories, for him, and if he thought that I didn't have this next feller on here, he would stretch me and stretch this next feller as well, because we will talk to one of Eddie Marlin's favorite people, one of his best buddies, one of his mates. I'm giving you guys hints on who this guest is. Superstar Bill Dundee, and here we go, Willie. Talking
All right,
about
Randy Dandy.
thoughts on Eddie Marlin.
Some of them I can say on the telephone, and some I can't.
Well, you know that he's up there with Norma now, so you don't want Norma. You don't want Norma getting mad at him.
No, I do not. I don't want her getting mad at me either. I've been on that side of the fence.
I'm sure you have. Well, so in 1975, when George Barnes and Bill Dundee came to America, came to Tennessee, one of the top tag teams at the time, the Southern Tag Team Champions, Tojo Yamamoto and Eddie Marlin. Now, you're used to wrestling in Australia. You come to Tennessee, different style. Then you have a short, kind of pudgy fella. And let's face it, Eddie, when you got here, was probably in his mid-40s. You know, he wasn't a young guy, and they were the number one tag team. So your thoughts and George's thoughts on Eddie Marlin and Tojo Yamamoto.
Well, just like you described them both, looking at them, they look like the Mutt and Jeff tag team of the wrestling business. Tojo was, 5'5", 5'6" tall and 240 pounds or 50 pounds or what, and Eddie was 6 foot tall and 212 pounds maybe. And me and Barton thought we was the two toughest guys in the world. So when we got here, that was our opponents, Tojo and Eddie. But it drew a lot of money, made Jerry Jabber happy and made Eddie Marlin happy, and Tojo and Bill Dundee and George Barnes. Now, one of the deals, we in Australia back in the day, that day, you did a lot of wrestling, like the English style, Tony Charles, Billy Robinson, that type of wrestling. We did that in Australia. Well, you can imagine Tojo and Eddie, when we got into Barnes, one day says to Eddie, "Hey, mate, we're going to do the sunset flip." So Eddie says, "Well, I don't do sunset flips." So Barnes said, "Well, you're going to do one today." So he shot him off and bent over, and Eddie, anyway, I wish we had a tape of it. It was quite comical, but he got him over. It was funny. It didn't look like a sunset flip, but he got him over. That was the main thing.
And you guys had some good matches with Tojo and with Eddie. And we talked the other night, that was your first program, and you won the Southern Tag Championship. I asked you, of course, in 1973, Eddie was established as a tag team with Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin. Obviously, Tojo Yamamoto, a huge, huge star, but as far, well, we can flat out say he was not the worker. Tommy Gilbert was. Tommy Gilbert was very, very good. So why do you think, I think you said you can remember a match or two, but you were not didn't have a long program with Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin. I think that would have drawn money and great matches.
I do too. I think that, and I'm only surmising this, you know how the business works. If two guys in the tag match is not exactly seeing eye to eye, so I don't think George and Tommy saw eye to eye, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that because I really can't prove it, but it just seemed like there was always bickering or something going on. Hey, God damn it, dude, you know how it is at the end when you get back to the back. And so Jerry just said, chop that off and we'll go with Tojo and Eddie.
And that did a lot of money, a whole lot of money. And Tojo and Eddie was a real good team. As you know, Eddie was born August the 13th, 1930. So in 1975, you're better at math than me, but in 1975, Eddie would have been 45 years Oh, he passed away, of course, Tuesday, or no, it was Thursday morning, the 15th of August, 2 days after his 89th birthday. And it was a situation where you've been friends with Eddie Marlin, and it was even though we knew he was sick, we didn't expect to lose him as soon as we did.
No. And like I told you, you know, because you've seen it, but when you tell somebody you have the hiccups, they just laugh and say, "Oh yeah, we had the hiccups." But brother, when you get a case of them like I had them, that's one of the reasons I couldn't show up there. You can't breathe; it's terrible. But I look like I'm a little better today. They changed my medicine, so it looks like it's working. So I'm sounding better.
Oh, you sound like $1 million. You sound like the superstar. And speaking of the superstar, I've been going through a lot of Eddie's wrestling stuff, and they tell me that I can have anything that I want. And if I find any pictures of Bill Dundee and Eddie Marlin together, I will put them in the mail, Willie. I'll have them come your way.
All right, Randy Benton, I appreciate that. So we did the program with Tojo and Eddie, and then when Barnes got homesick and went home, they teamed me and Eddie up. So that was, against Barnes before he left. That was when the Sunset Flip deal came. He said, "I can't do a Sunset Flip." He said, "Well, you're doing one today, mate." And that was that deal. So I had a lot of fun with Eddie Marlin driving up and down the road.
And there's stories.
Drank a few beers occasionally, and George and Tojo, and even with Tojo. I mean, Tojo could be grumpy if he didn't care for you or like you, but he was always nice to me, so I can't say a bad word about Tojo. But me and Eddie Marlin always got along good. We liked the same kind of beer, and that was it.
We'll have the beer stories in just a few minutes, but one thing that I wanted to say, tell the people, because when you came here with George Barnes, you were the rugged bad guy, but Christine Jarrett, the mother of Jerry Jarrett, and she was in the office every day. Now, about you, when she first saw you, what did Christine Jarrett say to Jerry Jarrett?
She said, "He's on the wrong side of the fence. He needs to be a babyface." And I thought, well, when you start off in this business, everybody wants to be the heel. So I thought, "Oh, I'm the heel. We're heels. I'm not a babyface." She said, "Well, you look like one, son." I said, "Well..." So she always, from day one, she said, "He needs to be the good guy."
Well, so George leaves, then you're kind of out in Dakota a little bit. Jerry Jarrett loved you from day one, so you teamed with Chris Colt plus several other people before you were switched babyface. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, Chris Colt mainly, yeah. And I guess we was all right as a heel team. I mean, Chris had been around with Mike Boyette, and they were the hippies, and he'd done all kinds of gimmicks as a heel, and him and me, I guess, we got over, so they kept us together a little while, but Christine, every time I saw her, she said, "You need to be the good guy, Bill Dundee." But she got her way in the end and turned out to be right.
So the interns were the heel tag team, and
right.
It was a situation where you came out, you were the only wrestler left. I don't know how that happened. You were the only wrestler out there, so you came because Eddie was getting beat up. And so how was it decided that Jerry would start the thing, your babyface run, with Eddie Marlin as your partner? What do you think the thought process was about that?
Again, I mean, we were so different stature-wise and looking-wise, and the team had clicked. I was the little cute baby face that would sell and tag the big rugged baby face, which was Eddie, and he would come in and throw them damn punches at you. So, yeah, I think he just saw something from the get-go. You know who Jarrett was. He was good at picking talent, and he thought, well, that'll be a hell of a team right there. And he was right on that, too.
Now, Eddie was basically a tag team wrestler. Lots of tag teams, and the two most famous, of course, Tojo and Tommy Gilbert, but he teamed with his brother, he teamed with Johnny Eagles Marlin, he teamed with a lot of people over the years. Then, all of a sudden, he was hooked up with you. A couple of years later, you became a single star, and you were battling over the Southern title. You were in the main events every night. Now, I wanted to ask you this, and I've never asked you this. Eddie was always a tag team wrestler. He had a program with Jimmy Kidd, program with Al Green, single, but basically he was a tag team wrestler. All of a sudden, you are the babyface star, the single babyface star of the territory, and the territory was transitioning from a tag team territory to a single territory. Do you think Eddie regrets never getting that run as a single babyface star? Do you think he was quite content in the role he was in?
No, yeah, he was content in the role he was. I don't think it bothered him either way. But Eddie, you know how he was. He knew what his capabilities was in the ring. As a tag team, he was very good. And as a single, he wasn't Billy Robertson or Tony Charles, you know what I mean? And he knew that. No, I think he was happy in his own skin. It never bothered him one way or the other. I mean, and back then, you just did what the promoter told you so. Told you be the good guy single, that's what you was.
What do you think his strength was as a babyface, as a wrestler? Was it his matches? I think you'll say no to that, even though that he wasn't horrible, but he wasn't no Jerry Lawler. Or was it those great interviews that the people could relate to?
That was what they could relate to him talking. Eddie was one of them talking to them. He'd talk you out of the seat and go buy a ticket and come see me. And he was always never going to give up, you know what I mean? You could beat Eddie 7 nights a week and it wouldn't hurt him because he would give you his all for the whole match, and then if you screwed him in the end, people would buy that, you know. But some people you can do that to and some you can't. But Eddie go over with the people in their hearts, and he was from the South and they knew it, and he wasn't going to quit on you. So, no, I think he fitted into the role real good and he didn't mind doing it.
Now, Jerry Jarrett's that type of humble baby face with those humble interviews, and of course Eddie is too. I always loved the flamboyant, I'll get it out in a minute, interviews like like Dusty Rhodes, like Superstar Billy Graham, like Troy Graham, the Dream Machine, Handsome Jimmy Vay, and Austin Idol. I like those type of interviews, but to me, and I did a Facebook Live several days ago, and I showed a Eddie Marlin interview. Late in his career, he was feuding with his old partner Tommy Gilbert, and that's my favorite type of interviews, Bill. You'll laugh at Handsome Jimmy saying, "Came rolling into Memphis, TWA, Mercy Daddy," and that's all cool. But Eddie just going out there and say, "With you guys behind me, that Bill Dundee and George Barnes that hurt me last week, but I can promise the people I will give it everything I have." People still today, and no, tell me one wrestler in the last 25 years have you heard do an interview like that? And I think it would still work.
Yeah, it would still work, but they don't. Yeah, I mean, but that was Eddie's personality. I mean, that was him in real life too. So I mean, I think the real life character would come in your interview. Me, I was a little cocky son of a gun, so when I got to talking, I came across a little bit cocky. George was a rough, tough, and hard to bluff dude, and he came across that way too. But what you saw in the good old days is what you get, and Eddie Marlin was a tough son of a gun, and a nice fella, and a baby face, and could talk to the people.
Now, would you say 1976, I believe I'm right on this, it could have been late in late 75, early 76 is when you switched and you were a babyface. Before that, because we had rules and we protected things back then, I would say the first trip you ever made with Eddie Marlin in a car would be when you were tag team partners with him. Is that true?
Right, yeah, you couldn't done it when you was opponents.
No, that just, you'd get fired.
You'd been out of a job.
If
you drove to Tupelo in the good old days like that, by the time you got to Tupelo, you would have been fired. If it was a heel and a baby face, that would just never happen. That's why we drew money back then.
Right. I would say.
And I've said this 100 times. The magician can't show you how to do the trick and it still be a trick. You know what I mean?
Right, and it doesn't work. So I would say, and see if you would agree with this statement from. Not late 75, early 76 to about 83 when you left to go other places. But from 76 to 83, I would say that you didn't ride with anybody as much as you rode with Eddie Marlin. Y'all traveled these roads a ton.
Yeah. And we did, yeah, it was, well, we both lived in Hendersonville, so it wasn't hard to find one another. And yeah. And so we just hit it off. Sometimes you just like that. Doesn't whether you drive a truck or you're a baker or you're a butcher or you're a wrestler. You get some guys you hit it off with, and some you don't. And me and Eddie hit it off from day one, and it was a very good relationship.
Yeah, it was very good, and you had a lot of times together, and a lot of times it was just you and Eddie. And you would tell your Friday, you'd leave home, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you would leave for Tupelo, Mississippi every Friday night, right?
Yeah, and we'd do the show, then we would drive into Memphis.
Well,
Let me give you a driving story here. I shouldn't really maybe say this, but that was back in 75.
The gin and tea story. The gin and tea story.
That's the one. That's it. So Eddie bought a 6-pack of tea, and he has a pint of gin. Now, he was driving, but it was a different era back then, so he's sitting over there driving, and he's put a little gin in that damn tea there, Bill. I said, well, okay, so I put a little gin in the tea and give it to him. So he has about 2 of them. So he says, give me another one of them gin and teas. The third one, I said, Eddie, I can give you the tea, but I can't give you no gin. He said, what happened to it? I said, you drank it. So I'd been putting a big shot in the tea, and he'd had, I think, maybe 3 of them. He was wanting a 4th one, and it was all gone. And we were on the way to Memphis. So anyway, we made it there. By the time it hit him, it was time to go to bed. So by the time we get to Memphis, he just, I'm going to bed. So he just went off to bed. We got up with a hangover, went to TV Saturday morning.
Hey, Bill, I really think we're trying to be respectful in all this, but the high spot of the story, there's more to the story, the rest of the story, and I think we need to tell that. I think we need to tell the story of he didn't go right to bed. You guys went to have breakfast. It's a classic story, and I'd like for you to tell that story. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, when they damn near got into the fight.
Damn near got shot.
Donna just walked in here, and I'll tell her I'm doing a podcast. She's yelling out. All right, she's going to the little girl's room, so here we go.
All right, tell that story. You go get something to eat, and you damn near got shot.
Yeah. Now it's all coming back. Them stories you kind of forget because you don't tell them very often, because that one I never... So we go to the restaurant, and there's a guy looking there, and Eddie's there, and we're all in. So, oh, God, I don't know how it started, but it did start it, and it was like the good old West days. This guy was going to get a gun. Eddie had a gun in his car. He had a big 44 Magnum or whatever you call that big silver pistol he had. And he said, well, I got a gun, too. And he goes out to get this gun. I said, oh, my God, we're all going to be shot. So, yeah. That was my first Wild West days in Memphis, Tennessee. Eddie and this guy was going to have a gunfight.
And tell the people the condition Eddie was at Channel 13 on Highland the very next morning. We're going to tell everything. He can't.
I forgot. Randy Hales, I'd really forgot this story, but I will. So we get to Channel 13, and here comes Jerry Jarrett to talk to us. We're sitting in that little room, where we was at. And God, did Eddie look sick. So Jarrett says to him, what the hell's wrong with you? Or some words to that effect. So he wasn't going to tell him we'd been drinking. But me being the nice baby face, I had to tell on him. So I said, it wasn't, he ain't sick. He's got a friggin' hangover, Jerry Jarrett. He drank a pint of gin in 2 minutes. On the trip home. So anyway, we kind of had a laugh then. Not that minute did we have the laugh, but by the time at the end of the day it became funny, but at the TV station it wasn't funny.
I think Jerry Jarrett wouldn't let him wrestle again until he went to the doctor and made him get a checkup to make sure he didn't have heart problems all over his dang
right.
gin.
Yeah, that's right. See, damn story. I'm glad I told you the story when it was fresh in my memory. Yeah, he made him go to the doctor and spend money to get a checkup and all kinds of things to make sure he wasn't sick. I said, he just has a hangover. Jerry thought he'd had a heart attack. That's how that part came up. Jerry said, are you okay? You feeling okay? I said, yeah, he's okay. He just had a freaking hangover. He was drunk last night. No, I wasn't. You know how you were. You would deny it. No, I wasn't. So Jerry said, well, you're going to go to the doctor. So he made him go to the doctor and get checked up and all that thing. Yeah.
You know,
when you don't tell them stories every day, you kind of forget them.
Well, I'm going to have you tell another one you told me years ago, and you might have, I hope you haven't forgot this one, but you were in the car with Jerry Jarrett, Eddie Marlin, yourself, and maybe somebody else, and you were coming back from Louisville. It's a famous CB story, and a story where Eddie ended up getting mad. He was the constable of Sumner County at the time. Do you remember that altercation instigated by Jerry Lawler on the CB that Eddie Marlin was ready to whoop a trucker on the side of the interstate? Tell that story.
Pull him over. Yeah, back then they would talk on the CBs were good if you used them for what they were meant for. If you got into a little trouble and you broke down and you called, blah, 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 blah. But when you run up and down the road 7 days a week and you had one in your car, you used it for fun as much as anything. So Lawler and Eddie got to talking on the damn CB. And then, was it the trooper that pulled us over?
No, I don't think it was
the truck driver. Yeah, it was
the truck driver did. And Eddie got out of the car laughing and joking because, you know, it was Lawler saying the terrible stuff. I've been with your wife when you're on the road and all that. And then he said, you pull over, I'll kick your butt. And Lawler said, well, I'm driving a green Lincoln Continental. Well,
yeah, that was the car we was in.
Right, and so he pulls you over, and Eddie got out laughing, you know, just was going to explain it, but the guy had a stick or a tire tool or some kind of thing and threatened Eddie, and Eddie flipped his lid, and then the cop ended up coming, and so I think Eddie told the cop, he said, not only am I going to arrest him, I'm going to kick his ass. You know, Eddie probably drinking a few ponies right there.
Oh, yeah, we'd had a couple of ponies. Yeah, you know who that was back then. Right. Yeah, I remember that story now. You said it, Eddie had his little constable badge. You go out with his badge. Truck driver didn't think that was too funny.
And then the cop held y'all to the truck driver. He told the truck driver to get his ass out of Sumner County as quick as possible, right?
Yeah, because Eddie's badge was, he had all the power in Sumner County. He was a Sumner County constable. He said, the cop said to him, Mr. Trucker, if I was you, I would get the hell out of Sumner County because that badge means something here. He says, when you get into Madison County, you'll be okay.
For the archives of the Memphis Memories podcast, you can check out memphismemories.libsyn.com, or the center point, the main office of all things Randy Hales is Randy Hales, memphiswrestling.com. Thank you so much. Memphis Memory Podcast on YouTube Extra is right at you, and we appreciate it because we're trying to build this YouTube page. You can share, you can like, you can subscribe. Help us build the audience. That way we can bring you more content. Until next time, this is Randy Hales saying bye-bye, everybody.
For the first time in 20 years, you can now own the greatest hits of our pro wrestling. Log on to RandyHalesMemphisWrestling.com. The last ever live studio wrestling. WWE's first developmental territory. Memphis Legends. Classic Memphis wrestling with a new twist. Live studio wrestling from the studios of WMC TV5. The Power Hour. Own the entire collection. Expect the unexpected.